Would you lawyer up? This story about an HOA president and the most terrible neighbor ever is insane. Here's what's up. I, 31 female, am the HOA president of a 14-house neighborhood. This neighborhood was built in 2017 and 18 by each individual neighbor, by hand with supervision alongside professional contractors and subcontractors as part of a low-income sweat equity government program backed by the USDA RD. Our HOA is self-governed, meaning the board members live in the neighborhood and we don't use a management company. Our dues are $360 per year. Average HOA dues for our county are between $200 to $500 per month, but ours are extremely low because it's a low-income neighborhood and we don't have like tennis courts, play areas, common areas to hang out in, and so on. 100% of the money goes to road and retention pond maintenance, insurance, taxes, and so on. This year, we'll spend over half of our total account balance getting our 2 roads and 2 cul-de-sacs a new asphalt seal coat to prevent further damage and cracking. Board members, including myself, don't get paid and actually often spend out of pocket ourselves for things like stamps and printer ink, food for our meetings, and so on. Things that any normal nonprofit would have a budget for. As an HOA, the board has a history of being extremely lenient with enforcing the rules, even to our financial loss. We have never charged a late fee, even after waiting over a year for late payments, never written anyone up for any of the countless violations, never done anything to enforce the rules, actually because, well, to be fair, the rules were just handed to us by this government program, and they don't make any logical sense for a rural neighborhood. All we're trying to do is make sure the roads don't fall apart, add some speed bumps, and keep the retention ponds functional. Functional, not aesthetic. They're overgrown as heck and behind tall locked fences to keep kids away from tragic accidents. Unfortunately, all those things cost way more than we bring in per year, so we've been saving up the dues money, not raising rates either, the entire 4 years that we've been collecting it. This year, we can finally afford street sealing, the highest priority and highest cost item. We're not your expensive or a measure your grass citation happy HOA. Now, we do have one neighbor who has been difficult from the very start of the build. This neighbor didn't show up to mandatory team meetings, didn't put in her required 30 hours of labor per week, and just generally screwed off while the rest of us built the house for her. Everyone else who put in the time, effort, and energy attended Saturday morning group construction meetings every week for a year and followed the very explicit group rules that we were all told that we'd be kicked out of the program for breaking, was understandably annoyed, and then upset, and then downright angry that apparently the rules were just for rule followers and didn't have any real consequences. After a year of her following a pattern of don't work or show up, have a meeting with the program directors, not neighbors, about her behavior, show up once, repeat, she got her keys and moved in alongside the rest of us. Then the real problem started. Like I said, the HOA is cheap. $360 a year or $30 a month. 13 low-income households pay their dues every year, and some of them have paid late or even very late. But they made contact, they explained the situations and paid eventually, and then we're chill, even though it's within our rights and contract to charge interest and even file a lien against any unpaying property. In our 4 years as a neighborhood, the same problem. Neighbor has paid $40 cash, total. All other neighbors who all qualify for the same low-income program have paid $360 every year, totaling $1,440 per family. For 4 years, all of our very chill attempts at collecting dues have been met with a text from her, saying something along the lines of, "Sounds great, unfortunately, I can't pay that right now." Or no response at all, or an error because she changed her number or email or whatever. To our knowledge, she's also not made a mortgage payment ever. If she gets a job, they'll garnish her wages, but the USDA plus COVID is just very exceptionally slow to foreclose on her. I know the process was started a couple of years ago, but nothing has changed and she still lives in the house. Here's the thing though. She and her boyfriend, probably the mastermind here, are terrible neighbors. They sell illegal substances and stolen goods. They don't have jobs but consistently have new tools and new toys. They have dozens of visitors all day and all night who go straight to the back garage door and leave after 5 minutes. They have loud altercations which have resulted in police involvement more than once, but nobody presses charges. A teenager living there OD'd. He survived, thank God. They do not pay for garbage service and instead pile bags upon bags of trash onto their back porch and against the fence that their next door neighbor, unfortunately me, paid out of pocket to build. This has led to a giant rat infestation and my dogs pulling trash into my yard under the fence. They burn their garbage in a barrel out back. And last night during a burn, they must have tossed in some aerosol can or propane tank or something because an explosion shook our bedroom and rocked our TV and hanging photos. Her response to my, "Hey, is everything okay over there? Because there was a literal explosion," text was, and always inconveniently is, "Well, I don't know, I wasn't home or just pulling in." Just all around trashy. As an HOA, we, myself, the treasurer and secretary, decided a long time ago that the only way we'd ever get paid was by recording a real estate lien against her, so that when the house goes to auction, at least the bank will pay us. We got misleading information about filing liens from the original program that we built the houses through, and because of that, we wasted 2 years trying to chase down the paperwork to file. Turns out, civilians can't just file a lien, but we finally found a local company that specializes in liens who's going to do it for $356.60. Cool, great, done. As stated in our bylaws, the homeowner is responsible for all their debts as well as for any expenses that we have to pay to collect them. After the lien and the interest, 12% per year, and we didn't even compound it, on her 4 years of unpaid dues, minus $40, she owes over $2,800. It's not a ton, but it's definitely not nothing. It also cost $120 or so to have the lien removed after payment. Yesterday, I met with a lawyer to start the process of foreclosing on the lien. It's within our legal rights and abilities to do so. Another cost that we pay out of pocket, but can add to the total cost of the lien as she's responsible for paying any legal fees related to collecting her debts. I called around till I found the cheapest lawyer. His basic fee for lien foreclosures is about $2,500 compared to the $7,500 that I was quoted by the lawyer that the lien company recommended. We're not trying to screw her over here, is what I'm trying to get at. We're not racking up billable hours with the best and the brightest, and actually this lawyer seems like he doesn't even know what he's doing, but we can afford him at least. We don't even have a bill yet, because yesterday's meeting was just a free initial consultation. So our out-of-pocket expenses so far are $356.60, plus like $6 for certified mail, plus potentially $120-ish for closing the lien if she pays it. The lawyer said that what usually happens is that both her and the lender, USDA, get taken to court. The lender then pays her debts and adds it to her total mortgage. Side note, the current boyfriend isn't on the home loan, so very unfortunately, he isn't legally responsible for any of the house-related finances, even if he's the driving force behind the undesirable activity. Well, yesterday, she texted another board member who also happens to be her neighbor on the other side, asking if we'd settle with her. They have a more friendly relationship than she has with anyone else in the neighborhood. My instant reaction was, heck no. In 4 years, she's made no attempt to settle, get on a payment plan, or do anything at all to lessen her debts. That, plus the overall pattern that she's demonstrated of do nothing till she's in trouble, do bare minimum to get out of trouble, repeat, on top of the general nuisance property complaints, have done very little to foster goodwill between her and anyone else. And honestly, I don't want her to live here anymore. We're all low income, but she's the only problem and nuisance property and drug house. I don't want to be forced into legal action every freaking year because it's the only thing that gets her to actually make a payment or one single attempt at paying anything. The other board member asked her to give us a number and we'd talk, and we haven't heard what the number is yet. I think I'd be willing to waive the interest only, but not any of the expenses that we've already paid for or the cost of removing the lien. But I don't want to. I want to take legal action. I want to take her and her lender, the USDA, to court in hopes that the USDA will finally actually sell her house and get the heck out. My gripe isn't just with her, it's also with the USDA RD for allowing her to stay in the program after countless complaints, even while she broke every rule and then some, including instances on site where police had to be called. So at this point, I want the USDA to feel the giant pain in the butt that we felt for 4 years due to their own enabling, negligence, and refusal to enforce their own program rules. Am I the butt for thinking that we should move forward with the lawyer and take her and the USDA to court? Commenter says and OP replies, not the butt. She's never going to pay y'all fully. The only way you can fix this is to rip the problem out by the root, and to do that, you've got to go through the courts. Encourage your fellow members to strengthen their resolve. It sounds like there's kids in the neighborhood, and you don't need a tragedy to happen. OP replies, there are literally 20 plus kids in the neighborhood. Only one household has no kids, and several have 5 or more. Tragedy feels like impending doom right now. Time to lawyer up. I mean, you're going to have kids in danger here, and they've had 4 years to actually do something, and they don't. They're just taking advantage of you, walking all over you, OP. Terrible HOA story time. I live in a middle-class neighborhood that's in a more affluent side of town. The houses all have similar colors and layouts, there's an HOA, and we have a community pool, and so on. I'm currently a college student living with my dad, and I very recently got a new car, a 2008 Nissan Sentra that my uncle used to own. He told me that if I paid to have it transported across the country and paid for whatever needed to be fixed at the mechanic, the car was mine. I agreed, I paid everything, and the car is mine now. I've had it for just under 2 weeks at this point, not counting the time it spent at the auto shop. I mentioned that our neighborhood has an HOA. Well, much like other HOAs, this one has some interesting rules in place. Namely, and this is the rule that affects this post's existence, there is a rule that no cars, absolutely no exceptions, may be parked on the street at any time past 2 a.m. This includes family, friends, and anyone else. If it's there, the car will be towed with zero notice, and it's a $220 fee to pick it up from the towing company that the HOA employs. My dad, several years ago, learned all of this the hard way, as he had to go pay the fee and pick up the car a few months after we moved in, which was in 2012, and he didn't know about that rule yet. Cutting about to 30 minutes ago, I was sitting in my room working on late-night homework, mostly because I'm a master procrastinator, and working at night stimulates my brain, or something. I'd said goodnight to my dad some hours ago, and my younger brother is asleep in the room next to mine. It's his birthday today, so he's back up from university dorm for the weekend. Suddenly, I hear my dad call out something about keeping our dog inside, and then the sound of the front door closing. Curious, I set down my headset, turn on the light in my room, grab my phone, and walk towards the front of the house. The house isn't big, so it takes me less than half a minute to reach the front door. My first thought as I was heading to the door was that, somehow, our dog got loose out of the front. We've had issues with us forgetting to lock or close the door in the past, due to us sometimes being a forgetful family, but I was sure there wasn't an issue there. It wasn't until I remembered that my car was parked on the street. Dad had to move it earlier during one of my online classes so that he could take his car out to pick up my brother, and we had forgotten to drive it back up onto the driveway. Therefore, when I open the door, through the darkness, I see the red lights of the tow truck, my precious new car lifted up onto its 2 back wheels, and my dad standing at the passenger side window trying to plead with the tow truck driver. Panic mode set in for both of us, especially because we didn't want to pay the $220 and have to drive almost all the way across town to pick up the car. The driver, though, gave us an out. If we paid $100 in cash right there on the spot, he would be able to leave the car for us to park in the driveway. An amazing alternative, save for the fact that we didn't have any cash. As such, we had to ask the driver to pretty please move his tow truck a little up the street, allowing my dad and I to hop in his car and drive to the nearest Wells Fargo, which was about a mile away. At this point, it was 2:09, literally only 9 minutes after the tow-away deadline. Clearly these people have better surveillance than the CIA. So I should mention at this point, I was wearing pajamas and had my slippers on, but Dad was still fully clothed. He fell asleep in his clothes like he usually does, but since he had been sleeping and I was still fully awake, we were both in different states of delirium. We drove down the road, probably going 80 in a 45, and turned into the shopping plaza where the Wells Fargo is. My slippers slap onto the asphalt and concrete as I sprint to the ATM, withdraw $100, and run back to the car, where we likely set a new land speed record getting back. When we got home, Dad parked his car while I paid the tow truck driver. Thankfully, he was relatively nice about the ordeal, despite his job description requiring taking my car and set the car back down after taking a few photos, likely for procedural job reasons or whatever. So I was able to park my car on the driveway and then head back inside, where Dad and I were finally able to take a breath of relief, even though I'd lost any semblance of tiredness as well as $100. The silver linings of this story, I suppose, is that my dad sent me $100 soon after through the internet. I told him that it was not necessary, but he insisted, so that part of the story was resolved nicely. At least now I have a cautionary tale to remind myself whenever I park my car on the street for some reason. I mean, it just comes down to like, hey, you gotta remember the rules to park on the street or in the driveway. But you know what? This is a stupid rule in the first place. Like, okay, yeah, remember the rule, but if it's not even there to begin with, you don't have to worry about it. What would have you done? Karen sends a disabled man to the ER, posted by ND25607. Here's a brief backstory. I'm a 33-year-old female, and I double RN for a local clinic during the day and an ER overnight. I'm married with 3 children. So it was an ordinary day at the clinic. There wasn't much going on since Kevin, just dealing with the usual PT or patient woes. Cough and sneezing, minor bodily injury, yeah, all that. Whenever a man comes in, and let's call him Todd, he enters with a service dog, a beautiful border collie. Naturally, the dog brings out all the ladies in my office, myself included. My AA or administrative assistant, named Nicole, does her regular scripted greeting towards the patient and asks the young man what brings him in. He's come in because he wasn't feeling well. The administrative assistant gets him started with the paperwork while myself and the MA, medical assistant, and the rad tech are making cooing noises towards this sweet fur baby. While the patient is filling out the paperwork, this small conversation took place. I say, "Hi sir, how are you today? What brings you in?" Todd says, "Well, you see, I haven't been feeling well. I'm having difficulty breathing in and out of my nose, and I'm congested in my chest." "Hey, I'm sorry to hear that. Can I ask, why do you have a service dog? We are legally allowed to ask this question due to the ADA guidelines." "Oh, I was born with Usher syndrome." "What's Usher syndrome?" Usher syndrome is where, over time, you progressively lose your ability to see or hear. In my case, it started when I left my mom. Yeah, because of my condition, I've also developed an anxiety condition that Abby was trained to sense and cue me down. "Oh, I am so sorry to hear that, sir. Please don't hesitate to call or ask us for help filling out any of the paperwork, okay?" "Oh, thank you, but that won't be necessary. I can see a little, but some things are blurry, but thanks for asking." "Oh, sure, sir. If you need any assistance, let us know. By the way, your doggo, she's really sweet. What breed is she?" "Oh, Abby, she's a 3-year-old boarder and she's been my best friend for years. I don't know what I'd do without her. I've raised her since she was a pup." "Oh, how sweet. Well, hey, I best be getting back to work. I'll be seeing you and Miss Abby in just a minute," as I ruffle the pup's collar. "Let me or Nicole know if you need anything." We part ways, briefly to go get the room ready for Todd and Abby. That's when we hear the door chime, indicating that another visitor has entered the facility. Per Nicole, she introduced our Karen. This woman looks like a version of Kirstie Alley, hands her the necessary paperwork, and Karen goes to sit down only a few seats down from Todd. Todd gets up to hand Nicole the paperwork that he's filled out, and Abby perks up and helps Todd across the room. Karen apparently didn't like this and keeps grunting and throwing nasty looks in Todd and Abby's direction. Todd and Abby take their seat and are waiting on myself and the MA to bring them to the back. Karen gets up and approaches Nicole. "Here you go." She hands back the clipboard with the paperwork. "Oh, ma'am, I'm so sorry," Nicole says, "but I noticed that you haven't completed your paperwork. Is there something I can help you with?" "No, I don't feel comfortable in here." "I'm sorry to hear that. Can I ask how I can make you feel more welcome?" "Why, yes, you can start by removing that filthy flea bag." Ma'am, I'm sorry, but that's something I cannot do," Nicole replies. "Ugh, why not? It's unsanitary to have a filthy animal in a sterile field. That dog doesn't belong in here." Perfect timing. Poor Abby perks her ears up as she is hearing an ambulance pass by the clinic with its horn blaring and brings her to howl. "Ah, shut up, you filthy flea bag," she screeches at the dog. "Shut that stupid mutt up." Todd chimes in, "Hey, I'm so sorry. Shush, Abby." He pulls on her lead and tries to get Abby to settle down. She doesn't often do this. Bull crap. That mangy mutt probably isn't a real service dog anyway. Probably just bought the vest off of eBay, you lying craphead. Nicole replies, "Ma'am, I am sorry, but you cannot be approaching our other patients or the dog. The dog is a service dog for this patient. Please lower your voice. It may disturb the other patients in the office." She tries to redirect Karen as she says, "Would you like my help filling out your paperwork so you can be seen by the provider?" "No, I want this mutt removed and to speak to your provider." "Sure, ma'am." Nicole places a brief call to the back nurse station and requests that I come out to the front and give a brief indication that there is an urgent matter happening out front. So I get up and I go out to the front where I greet and meet our Karen. "Hi, ma'am, how are you doing today?" I say. "Not so good, honey. You see, I came in here because I'm experiencing a lady problem, and this beast here keeps making inappropriate noises and it stinks. I've asked your receptionist here to do her job and get that beast out of here, and she refuses to kick that kid and his mutt out. It's just not okay." "Oh, well, I am so sorry to hear that. What noises are you hearing that you find inappropriate?" "It's howling and panting, and it's just so nasty and unsanitary." "I'm sorry, ma'am, but per the ADA, we cannot discriminate against the disabled or prevent them from using a service animal." "What? He is abusing that animal. How can you people be so cruel and disgusting? You'll burn in heck, you piece of crap." She wags her finger at Todd now. "Ma'am, that is enough. You're going to have to calm down or I am going to have to ask you to leave. There is no need for that name calling or for this issue to escalate. That dog is a service animal and is here to assist his owner in daily tasks. Now, if you would like to still be seen by myself or my provider, I can go ahead and take you to the back and have you wait in an exam room." "Really? I want to see that mutt's papers." She approaches Todd with her hand out, demanding for his registration papers. "Ma'am," and I get between her and Todd to prevent Karen from getting too close, "that is not necessary, and you're not allowed to ask anyone for proof of identification or medical necessity. I think it's best you find another physician's group to care for you, as we won't be able to help you today." How dare you? Why can't you see me? And why do I have to leave? That monster and his filthy mutt should leave." She argues. "I demand you kick them out now." "Ma'am, I have asked you to stop yelling. I am sorry, ma'am, but I will not be able to treat you today as you're acting very inappropriate and causing a commotion here. Could you please leave?" "Oh, shut up. I can do and say whatever the heck I want to, and I will not leave until I am seen and that monster with his mutt are thrown out." While my back and attention was focused on Karen, Abby had gotten up and was alerting to her owner's distress cues from Todd. All of Karen's screaming had begun to make Todd panic. That's when Todd stood up, grabbed Abby's lead, and just collapses on the floor after slightly hitting one of the other chairs in the waiting room. I quickly turn around, rush to Todd, and order Nicole to get the MA and the other RN. "Oh, stop faking it, you stupid idiot." She scuffles and approaches Todd, kicks his boot, trying to make a move. Nicole returns with my MA and RN. While all three of us attend to Todd, Nicole asks for Karen to step back a bit. "Why the heck do I have to step back? He is faking it. Get that dang mutt out of here. I told you this was no place for him." "Shut the heck up, dang it." Not my finest hour, but I was panicked and irritated at this woman's audacity. The whole room goes quiet. This would be one of those very rare occasions that I have ever gotten this angry. I call over my shoulder for Nicole to phone the authorities and an ambulance. I proceed to position Todd on his back with the help of the RN, and I check his airways and use my hands to feel the back of his neck and his head to make sure there's no bleeding or swelling. I also use my stethoscope to check his heart and lungs. I then proceed to try and wake Todd up. He is not responding. I take out my ophthalmoscope from my scrub jacket's pocket and try to look into Todd's eyes. I check his pulse and I ask my RN to get his blood pressure and pulse oximeter using her wrist cuff. I speak over my shoulder to the MA to start an IV line. I don't think it's life-threatening, but I don't want to risk it with how quickly Todd went down. Besides, he did say he was having issues breathing, and I know we do not have that type of equipment within the office if he begins to code. The longest 20 minutes of my life. And an IV drip started. Todd is on the gurney bed of an ambulance and he's being loaded into the back of it. I turned to the local authorities that followed the ambulance and asked them to remove Karen from the premises. But you haven't even asked about how I was doing. Ma'am, you'd be lucky that I don't personally press charges against you for assaulting myself, my staff, and that patient. You should be ashamed of yourself. Oh, pish posh, I did nothing wrong. You, not me, should be arrested for allowing that beast in here. Enough is enough, the officer replies. Karen, please follow me. And the officer just drags her out of the office with her stammering. The office did press for a trespassing ordinance against Karen and escorted her out of the building. We haven't seen or heard from her since. As for Todd, and thanks to one of the daytime employees at the local ER, Todd is doing much better and needed to be observed overnight due to his head trauma and cardiac arrhythmia, just for precautions. He made a full recovery. When his relatives arrived at the hospital, the parents pressed assault charges against the Karen. I have been in communication with their attorney. HOA story time. I bought my first home in the winter of 2021. It is a condo, half of a duplex, with the other half owned by my neighbor. Let's call her Carol, because her real name is all too appropriate. Together, we have equal interest in the property's HOA. Before I had even made my first mortgage payment, she was telling me that I needed to increase my HOA fees to account for an increase in expenses for lawn care. She reasoned she did not need to do the same because she was unemployed and handled the books. Well, I proposed the alternate solution of doing lawn care ourselves, which she agreed to, and we have shared the duties moving forward. Fast forward to a few weeks ago. Leaves were covering the front and the backyards and the driveway. I noted this, especially the driveway, as it can get slippery with leaves, but I could see a lot more leaves were yet to fall. On a Sunday morning, after we had been working at the craft fair for over 12 hours the day before, my neighbor texted to ask if we planned to do any lawn cleanup. I replied, explaining that it was on my to-do list, but was leaving for a trip that week and I planned to address it the following weekend. I received no reply, but noticed that she had people over that evening, so I assumed that she had been looking for it to be done that day before her company arrived. The next day, she texted me that she took care of the raking that time, but was so exhausted that she could not move the pile of leaves that she created until the day after. It had rained earlier. She said that the leaves could not have waited because they would mat and freeze together. I offered to finish where she had left off since I had an unexpected day off, but she declined. The weekend following our trip, as I had said we would, I raked both yards and my partner cleared the driveway. I distributed some of the collected leaves along the edge of the yard to decompose and feed the garden beds, and I added the rest to a compost pile that Carol had started in the far back corner of the yard. The next morning, she texted me asking to finish the job by moving all of the leaves to the compost pile. I explained that the placement was intentional. This then prompted her to send me a long email, in lieu of a condo meeting, and going into general condo concerns, but really focusing on the yard work and the surrounding expectations. Throughout it, she expressed that she was open to my ideas, but the primary impression was, I know better than you. She details why the lawn needs to be mowed weekly during the summer, but not cutting it too short. She says that only moving the leaves to the side of the yard will cause them to be blown back into the yard, and instead, they all must be moved to the pile at the back of the yard. She also mentioned that she is older, so she needs to reduce the amount of work that needs to be done, while also saying that this is the way that has worked for so long. She does her fair share of lawn care, which I suppose I'm fortunate for. The issue is really that the lawn has to be kept to her standards, which I have tried to address, and she claims that I am holding my opinions and assumptions against her. Am I being gaslit over here? I am at a loss of words on how to handle her anymore, and I'm really feeling that I just need to find an actual house for myself and just be done with this HOA nonsense. At this point, I think the simplest solution would be to go back to paying a third party to handle lawn care, giving up the hope of helping the environment. Now, Carol, our Karen of the story, is a 60-something divorcee with adult children. She recently described her work-from-home job as editing one PDF a day. My partner and I have schedules that keep us out of the house 12 hours a day during the work week, leaving the weekends for cleaning the house, errands, and work on my side hustle. I'm working to be more eco-friendly and sustainable, and I'm very interested in the no lawn movement, but I understand that I share the property with another person with her own views. At our first condo meeting, I asked about starting a compost pile, and she said that it would attract bears. I do not spend any time outside on our property because of several factors, on top of my lack of free time. Our backyard is very buggy, regardless of the time of day and year it seems, to the point that Carol sets up her chairs in the driveway. We have a 20-pound dog that she asked us early on to not let him do his business on the lawn, and he does not get along with her cat that frequently roams the property. Carol spends much of her time out there, so I would have to be prepared to listen to her on a phone call or having a very one-sided conversation about her life. Like the last time I went outside for a while, she told me how her 3 neighbors were conspiring against her. She told me at least 2 of them blocked her number, but of course, she is the victim. Insufferable Karen, how would you handle her? I would just want to make peace, but at the same time, I want her to know that no, this ain't cool. What would you do? The HOA is pulling some really shady stuff here in Documenting Potential HOA Retaliation by Grumpkin. I'm in Virginia, single-family home. I've been in my home about 10 years. Never had an issue with the HOA other than an occasional superficial reminder about the driveway weeds. The details. About 3 months ago, I got a violation for some landscaping stuff that was never an issue in the past, but okay, whatever. They told me to fix A and B within 60 days or they would fine me. I completed it that weekend and assumed that it was over. After 3 weeks, I received a follow-up notice about a fine hearing being scheduled because I didn't fix the violations. I contacted the HOA management company rep via email, telling them that I completed A and B as required. He replied saying that he confirmed it was complete and my violation has been cured and the hearing was canceled. A few days after my canceled hearing date, I received a letter saying that at the hearing, they determined that I didn't fix issues C and D, which weren't on the initial notice, and they were going to move forward with fining me in 30 days unless I completed those tasks as well. I reached back out to the management company, and the rep said that he was sorry, but the board changed their mind about the violation. I was ticked, but I completed the new violations they identified. I completed it just before the quarterly meeting. I haven't attended in years because it always has been a petty gossip fest about neighbors' grass and crap. Anyway, I attended, and the HOA manager was like, "Oh, you're here. Do you want to talk about your violations?" So I went into a little rant about how they moved goalposts, combined new violations with the original ones, weren't being consistent with the 30-day resolution time frame, and, most of all, the fact that they weren't clear in what they wanted done. They responded with silence, and I had a feeling that I just made some enemies. The HOA company manager spoke first about having my violations reassessed, and the HOA president, I assume no one introduced themselves, said that they would personally do my assessment, and then someone else said they would help him, and that people only join these meetings to complain. A few days later, I got an email from the HOA manager saying that my violations were cured. Fast forward to a month ago, and I got a letter from the HOA saying that I had new violations for code blah blah for general maintenance and debris. I just can't think of a more generic and vague violation than general maintenance and debris. I was initially ticked off, and I felt that it was retaliation, but I spent a weekend making my place look good. I power washed everything, put down fresh mulch, I removed anything resembling weeds and all that stuff. It's looking good. That was done 2 weeks ago. Well, I got a new letter yesterday about a scheduled fine hearing notice for failure to fix my general maintenance and debris violation. I'm going to attend the hearing this time. What should I do to prepare, and what questions should I ask to help me determine what their actual motivations are? I think I'll just sit there quietly and let them do all the talking this time instead of confronting them. Unfortunately, I feel like they have all the power and authority. Do you agree with this commenter? They say, "I think it's always a good idea not to be confrontational. However, you need to stand up for yourself, being as diplomatic as possible. It might help to prepare a statement in writing." The fact that they're not telling you specifically what the violation is a concern. The violation notice should tell you exactly what's wrong and specifically which restriction it violates. I would point out that you worked hard to comply, but were never informed of exactly what the issues were. I also suggest reading up on the laws in Virginia pertaining to HOAs. One thing I found with a quick Google search is that Virginia is one of the many states where courts view ambiguous covenants in favor of the homeowner. My guess is that your covenants are ambiguous, which is probably why the violation notices are not specific. I wouldn't imply that you're going to sue, but just knowing the law may make them think twice about enforcing unclear restrictions. Yeah, can they do this stuff? Let me know what you think. This story takes place in an HOA, and it's called Ex-Friend Expected Free Rent, posted by Deleted. My lifelong friend wanted to live in my condo that I wasn't actively using because I had relocated to another city, apartment, before I was going to then rent out the condo. I told him that he could use it for a small amount of time until he found his own place, maybe even 6 months, just not for too long. I paid $280 a month in HOA dues. It had a pool, security, and so on. And property taxes ran me about $200 a month. Plus, the electric bill was then assessed by unit each month. I told him he could stay at the condo for $550 a month, just my cost to keep it going, and this was in Southern California. He agreed to pay, didn't seem to grumble or anything, and I honestly thought that I was doing something really nice for my longest time friend. An 820 square foot condo with a pool for $550 a month in California. You're just not going to find that. I wasn't making a dime off of him. I just didn't want to lose money and subsidize his lifestyle out of my pocket. Fast forward a few months. My other friends all inform me that he's been texting them about what a B I am that I dare charge him rent to stay there. How could a friend charge money for that? My friends didn't know what was the deal, so they asked me, and I told them that I'm not charging him any rent. I'm literally just asking that he pay the cost of the unit and nothing more. For reference, when he left eventually, I rented it for several years at $1,300 a month, so he was not even paying half of market rent. I owned the condo free and clear, so I had lower costs with no mortgage, thus allowing me to charge him less and break even. Finally, when we eventually went to move my stuff out of there, and yes, it was fully furnished too, with a nice TV, kitchen items, everything you could need. He had broken about a quarter of my dishes. He had left a used rubber hanging on a trash can, and while my 105-pound girlfriend and I packed my stuff, he sat on the couch, not offering to help at all, even once in 3 days. He laughed about the rubber, and he took a giant dump in the bathroom and clogged the toilet, requiring a plumber to fix. And then, when we went to dinner, he forgot his wallet and never paid me back. He even woke us up early after we were up late packing by talking on the phone with online friends that he met on various chat forums. We didn't remain friends long after that, needless to say. I couldn't believe just how oblivious that is to just get such a good deal and then badmouth the person for doing you a favor and then trash their place. I spent a bunch more on housekeeping, and my real estate agent who was renting it out after he left said that the housekeeping service had never seen a place so filthy. We noticed that too. Besides the rubber, there was just dirt and filth everywhere. He wiped it out. Do you agree with this commenter? If that was my own brother, I'd have his butt on the street immediately after finding out that he was crap talking such a sweet deal. And OP drops this face palm right here. It kinda makes it funnier if I mention that he had inherited over $100,000 just a few years earlier, quit his job, blew through the money in 2.5 years completely, and then started trying to mooch wherever possible. I urged him to invest that money and continue working, but he didn't. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. What do you think? Lock up the vacation homes. You never said what, Lock, posted by Cynical Altruist. This was fun. A while back, my friend and I had a brief job working a managed vacation home place, basically renting really nice houses to people over the summer. Think $1,000 per day, and you have the basic units. At the end of the fall, the place hires a ton of people, students, to go around and winterize all the summer homes and prepare the year-round cabins for winter, like hauling wood, replacing storm windows, checking insulation, adding blankets, stuff like that. So my friend and I sign up. Pay is per day. It's pretty good for just a week of house maintenance. I don't know if it was technically legal since we never signed a contract, but I knew the people who ran the property, and they were down to earth. They were honest people that I could yell at if I didn't get paid. Now, also on this property are personal units. Basically, someone bought or leased the building, not really sure which, but the maintenance is still taken care of as if they were a rental. These units have special needs as it was put to us. Stuff like alarm systems, sheds, garages, registered gun and liquor cabinets, cameras, and, most importantly, door locks. That last one is the reason this post exists. So, towards my last day, my friend and I are tasked with opening one of these personal units, basically just making sure that it can be moved into. We check the water is on and running, that the pipes on the outside are off, and that everything is just right for the people who live there. We finish and prepare to lock up the building. There's the deadbolt, keyed by the property, and a padlock on each door, the front, back, and basement, and the shed and garage, if there is one. When the family isn't there, a property padlock is put on, basically bought off the shelf and cataloged in the most beautiful and easy-to-use key cabinet that I've ever seen. Was later told that this prevented master key theft despite the hassle. When the family is arriving, they put on padlocks if they supply them, or they leave them off if they don't. Once the personal unit's occupied, all padlocks are removed for fire safety purposes unless put on by the homeowner. None of the other units we did had supplied their own padlocks. As far as I know, the service was only offered because someone had accidentally broken a deadbolt in the middle of the winter and wanted a second way to lock the door. They offered this as a solution, and everyone else was butthurt that someone else got this solution and they didn't, accidentally setting a precedent. Usually they can only accept combo locks and keyed locks, so the combos and the keys can be filed away for their use if necessary. But not this time. Nah, this time it was smart padlocks. These locks were biometric, and they had been sent with incredibly specific instructions. Incredibly specific instructions that were illegible since the ink had been ruined by the protective oils on the metal. So we called the family. A man answers. "It's a padlock. How frickin' stupid do you have to be to not know how to use a padlock?" Okay then, bad time to call or just a jerk? You decide. The park manager says that once these locks are on, the staff can't take them off since they're not keyed for our fingerprints. Well, I'd expect everything to be done by the time I get there. Isn't that what I pay you for? Well then, definitely a Richard. Now, one of these things about these locks was that they were all fail secure, so if they lose battery, they are locked until they're powered. The batteries on these things hadn't been charged in a while. These locks were also not rated for outdoor use, and we were expecting thunderstorms that week. You can see where this is going. We didn't charge the locks. There's no cover over the front door, the basement door, garage, or shed, so that's where we put the ones that had the best battery life left. The rain would fix that. The others were pretty much about to die. And the next day, it rained super hard. From the park manager, I learned that the family had to wait an hour in their car before the manager arrived with bolt cutters. They were fuming at the amount of money they had just thrown out, and each lock was like $50, and the park manager cited his call in the damage, and insurance refused to cover, stating that the locks had never been intended to be used outside. After this, electronic locks of any kind were banned, and it gave the park manager a reason to remove the rule allowing tenants to request or put on padlocks. Revenge is a dish best served cold. Mine has been cooling for 10 years and counting. Posted by PettyAF452. I, a 40-year-old female, have been married to my husband, 44 male, for 20 years now. We have 2 kids, 16 female and 13 male. My husband is what I would consider a high earner by middle-class standards. Also, strap in, folks. This is going to be long. I've never told anyone, so... 10 years ago, and by complete coincidence, I found out that my husband has been cheating on me with men, and that from before we got married. We live in a smallish town in the south of the USA, and him coming out as gay will have consequences. I believe that that is the only reason he's not come out to anyone. First, here's how I found out he was cheating on me. He got sloppy, left a credit card bill for a secret card in the pocket of a coat. While going through it, I found all the telltale signs of infidelity. Payments to a hotel in a nearby county, restaurant bills, gifts, flowers, certain items, and so on. I started camping outside the hotel on days that he told me he would be late, and I saw him bringing different men there. I am very good at compartmentalization and have a great poker face. It comes with growing up in an abusive household, so I was able to give myself the time to cool off and to come up with what I should do. First thing I did was getting an STD panel since I didn't know how safe he was with his partners. It came out negative. Then I convinced him that we should use items since I was having side effects from the pill, and he was okay with it. I had a long think, and I came up to the decision that I was not going to confront him, nor was I going to leave him. He was able to provide me a really good lifestyle, one that I would never be able to afford with my high school diploma, like a cleaning lady, a nanny to help with the kids, regular spa days in a country club, a new car every other year, luxury family vacations every year. And he was a good dad, a good partner, cheating aside, and really good in bed. But I was not going to let him have a single guilt-free week in his life. That would be my revenge. I started small, planning great date nights for us, telling him that I felt our relationship had cooled and that I wanted the spark back. Then I would sometimes slip into conversation some tea about a cheating husband, a gay man that has been using his poor wife as a beard, complimenting the only gay couple we know for having the courage of being real men who were out and proud of themselves. On the other hand, I would praise him as the perfect husband to anyone and everyone, especially if he was in earshot. The amount of guilt gifts I got was astounding. The man was even sending me flowers weekly. It continued the same way for years. I could literally see how much it was weighing on him. Me? Well, my parents were part of a commune with the concept of free love, so I was the same. I just considered myself in an open marriage. It seems that cheating is easier to ignore if you are not that big on monogamy in the first place. And my husband was keeping me satisfied, so I felt no need to find a partner of my own. Then, 4 years ago, I guess he met the love of his life. He started seeing just the one guy. I was seriously thinking of ending the whole thing, especially since I've started a business by then and was able to bring in enough money to support myself and my kids while maintaining my lifestyle. But then he went and introduced his side piece to us. He freaking brought him into our house, introduced him to our kids, and that was enough for me to keep tormenting him. Apparently, he was a new friend he made while golfing. He started hinting at moving to another state, one where it would be easier for him to come out. I refused. I told him that my business was here, and I was not going to start over in another state. Also, the kids had their friends and extended family here, and it would be unfair to uproot them. Then, he started trying to start arguments. I guess he wanted us to fight, and then asked me for a divorce. I just stopped all those arguments in their tracks. I would just agree with whatever he said. He was right, I was wrong. And, to make it up to him, how about a nice dinner and some great hanging out time? He hated that. I knew from spying on his phone that doing stuff with me felt like cheating on his boyfriend. The audacity of this man. I also knew that his boyfriend was pressuring him to leave me almost every day. He was stuck between a rock and a hard place. He started drinking, and when it got too heavy, that was when I decided that enough was enough. I wanted to ruin his life, not his health. Also, I grew up with an alcoholic father and did not want that for my kids. So, I gathered all the evidence of his infidelity over the last 9 years, photos with different men, conversations, his Grindr profile, even though he no longer had one, everything. Then, I hired a divorce attorney and mailed the evidence to his employer. He has a morality clause in his contract, and adultery breaks it. All his relatives, including parents, as well as our church, I was never big on religion like him. It was like a bomb exploded. He was fired. The congregation turned on him for cheating, not for being gay. Let's keep that straight. I would never allow my kids to be a part of a church that was discriminating against their father, even if he was not out. His parents wouldn't take him in after I kicked him out, and he was shamed publicly. Gotta love that small town gossip mill. And the cherry on top, his boyfriend was run out of the town, and he couldn't follow him because he wanted to fight for custody of our kids. Now, almost a year later, I am a free woman. I got to keep the house, my car, and my business. He got 75% of the retirement and investment accounts, but he won't be paying alimony. I got full custody, and he got visitations. I also got child support. He had to move 6 hours away to find a new job. Couldn't put the last job he worked at his whole life as a reference. His relationship with his family is rocky. His reputation in town is ruined, so he can't move back anytime soon. The love of his life left him for good, and my kids only tolerate him because I did my best to shield them and to tell them that he is still a good father to them. I also made sure to treat him politely, never talk bad about him, and had a lengthy talk about how their father being gay is okay. It's who he is, and it's not his fault. That the only wrong thing he did was hiding it from me. So I guess the results of his cheating was years of guilt, followed by a ruined life. Now here's an edit. Let's make something clear. I am not the good person in this story. We were both bad. I'm not here trying to get pats on the back or to be told that I did well. I know that what I did was messed up. I'm here because I wanted to tell someone, and I can't do that in real life. I sued my HOA and won, posted by Mopanic. There seemed to be a lot of posts about wanting to take legal action against an HOA, but very few actually do it. So I thought I would share my story. This is not legal advice. I've been in my HOA for about 15 mostly drama-free years until a few years ago when the HOA changed management companies. The new one decided that they were going to be more proactive on enforcement of violations. Not that things were going downhill, they were not. Everyone's home has basically doubled in value over the last few years. They are well maintained, nice, newer homes in a desirable area. The new PMC, or property management company, got the board to adopt new rules and regulations and new bylaws. The board has essentially been controlled by one old lady for about 10 years. I'll call her Karen. Karen has never liked me and about 6 other families in the neighborhood, and we suspected all along that she would use the new rules to target those that she didn't like, which is exactly what happened. Sometime later that year, we started getting violation notices via email for stupid crap. One was for a package left on a porch, one was for a bag of mulch left out. No fines yet, but that came soon enough. Around the same time that we decided to paint our house. Part of the process to have the color approved is you have to paint a 3-foot square on the front so the ARC can look at it. They rejected it. So we painted another one, resubmitted it, and waited, and waited, and waited. They never approved or denied the second color. So we waited for the 30-day clock to run out, after which you can assume approval. Then the fines started. With no warning, we got an email stating that we had been fined for having, quote, mismatched paint, end quote. Yes, they were fining us for painting the squares that they require in order to approve a color. We were also fined for having Christmas lights in the summer. There have never been Christmas lights on our house. This was just likely an address mix-up. We complained on the HOA's website, but were banned immediately. So far, this was all done via email, but to appeal a fine, you have to send a certified letter to the PMC, which we did, but in the meantime, we spoke to a lawyer who specializes in HOA law. He reviewed our DCCR and all the other documents, and he gave us this advice for the appeal. Just politely say that you do not think that the board has the authority to issue fines. That's it. Don't get into anything further. That's exactly what we did, and the board was gobsmacked at our gall to question their omnipotence and our non-participation in their appeal. They upheld the fines as expected, which made our lawyer very happy. We also learned that someone else had been fined for having too many cars, and someone else got a mowing fine that was intended for their neighbor. This PMC was completely incompetent. Add a fair dose of malice from Karen and indifference from the other board members, and you have the recipe for a cluster crap. What we knew, but apparently they didn't, is that HOAs in Texas do not have a statutory authority to levy fines. That power must be granted in the restrictive covenants, and ours did no such thing. There's also a law, Chapter 209 of the Texas Property Code, which among other things states that before fines can be issued, the HOA must send a certified letter to the owner, giving them an opportunity to cure the violation. They hadn't. 209 also states that all board meetings must be open to all owners, and any meeting where rules, regulations, or bylaws are going to be discussed must be noticed to all homeowners. They didn't do any of that. The HOA was 1. Levying fines with zero authority to do so. 2. Ignoring state law that dictates how HOAs must issue fines if they have the authority. 3. Adopting rules and regulations in secret meetings in violation of state law. And 4. Changing bylaws in secret meetings in violation of state law. We had them dead to rights, and everyone knew it. Texas also has a law that grants attorney's fees to the prevailing party in a suit about violations of restrictive covenants. This usually benefits the HOA, but it can work both ways. Our fantastic attorney wrote a devastating but absolutely beautiful complaint. I mean, it was pure poetry, and I should have it framed. It was served on the board and PMC. I don't know what went on behind the scenes, but I imagine it was pure panic once they spoke to a lawyer who told them they were totally screwed. A few weeks later, we heard that Karen and a couple other board members had decided that they were just too busy to continue serving on the board and sadly had to step down. There was an election, and now the board is controlled by the very few people who had been targeted by their BS fines. The HOA lawyer asked to settle. We asked for 1. Refund all fines, late fees, and penalties ever issued to anyone over a violation plus interest. 2. The PMC can no longer have anything to do with violations. They can only do administrative things. 3. Revoke all actions taken by the board in the last 4 years. 4. Add a term limit that prevents Karen from running again for 10 years. It doesn't name her, but it's worded so that it only applies to her. And 5, of course, pay all of our legal fees. We could have gone further, but at this point, the bad board members had fled the scene, so we would just be inconveniencing people who had been on our side all along. This here was an epic smackdown of an HOA Karen who, because no one ever questioned her authority, had gotten way out over her skis, and it felt really good to see her smug butt crash and burn. But a few words of caution are needed. If the HOA had decided to fight, there is a 50-50 chance that we would have lost at the district court level. This is because in Texas, judges are elected and the HOA lobby, CAI, is a huge contributor. Many district court judges will grant summary judgment against any homeowner regardless of the facts. We eventually would have won on appeal, but we had to be prepared to go the distance and pay up to $20,000 or more out of pocket, knowing that eventually we would get it back. And no, HOA lawyers do not work on contingency, and they are expensive as heck. Another word of caution for anyone considering legal action: make sure that you have a lawyer who specializes in HOA law, not real estate law, not your cousin's college roommate who just passed the bar. The deck is stacked against the homeowner, and even with a slam dunk case, it could be ruinously expensive if the HOA decides to go the distance just to screw you over. You are spending your own money to fight. The HOA is also spending your money and that of your neighbors and their insurance company to fight back. A large HOA could spend over $100,000 and make you do the same just to make an example out of you. You need a lawyer who has done exactly this before and knows the HOA law inside and out. At the end of the day, you have to weigh the cost and benefit of a lawsuit just like anything else. In my case, it was worth it because we don't plan to move, and this was the only way guaranteed to stop the BS and get the HOA back on the rails. Woo, OP deserves a gold star because not only did he go in completely armed with knowledge with everyone else backing him up, knowing what to do with this Karen and getting rid of her, you just took on a greater than $100,000 risk to fight this. You spend over 20 grand of your money, yeah, you get it back, but that's a lot of capital to put up front, especially when you're fighting this. You got your family to pay for, your mortgage, all your utility bills and everything. And then this was a huge risk-reward situation for OP and all the friends, and hey, it worked out in the end because Karen and her cronies were out of here. OP and everybody's on the board. They got a great lawyer, and actually a lot of the comments are wanting to know who this lawyer is, and OP says that, well, he's already moved out of state. Please don't ask. OP, you took the risk, came out the clear winner, and took down the HOA Karen, and that's what we like to see on this channel, don't we? HOA vandalizes father's truck, gets immediate justice, posted by Deleted. This happened a few years back. Our HOA has always been known to be sneaky and to flat out give false accusations on homeowners, especially in this day with security cameras, and we can pretty easily spot out who the investigators are. Most recently, a homeowner was told that she was supposed to get approval before she started reshingling her roof. The thing is, her roof hasn't been reshingled in 10 years, and she had no plans to do it. Things like that. Call it just a mistake, call it malicious. Well, a few years ago, we had our time to shine. It was a simple morning. I was still temporarily living with my father at the time. Well, one morning we decided to go out to get groceries when we found that his pickup truck had been smashed into. Nothing was taken, it was just smashed into. In fact, I still have pictures from the day just before the cops arrived. Cops arrived, they do some investigating, and found that a rock inside the truck was from a house down the street. Unfortunately, they couldn't get them to admit to the crime, nor could they prove it was even them. Understandable, criminals will grab things that they find, but it was suspicious. The rock, I should say, was a special kind of rock that no one else in the neighborhood had, some round polished type, very unique. After this incident, I installed a security camera on his house. Well, not 2 days. 2 days later, we got an HOA violation for a vehicle eyesore that needs to be removed. Just 2 days later. I'm confused how such a letter could have been written up so fast, but I started to suspect foul play. One day, we were home and had a knock at the door. The HOA actually called a code inspection officer. The week hadn't even been over yet, so the parts to fix the truck weren't delivered yet. Now, we weren't paying expedited shipping for damages that we didn't cause, and the truck was so old, insurance would probably just total it. The truck is sentimental to him, so he was not going to get rid of it. I mean, it still ran great. Code inspection tells my father that vehicles which do not run need to be removed. They both stop talking and take a second, and both almost say at the same time, "Don't I know you?" Turns out the code inspection officer went to the same church as my father, and they knew each other. This isn't the malicious compliance yet. We are only just beginning. The officer tells my father if he can show that the truck starts, he's going to write it up as being in code. My father starts the truck just fine as the engine isn't damaged. He tells him to go on with his day and to have a good one. At this point, we are furious because we are starting to suspect that the HOA may have did this, as there's no way they could have possibly known so fast. Unfortunately, our turn of the street had no neighbors with security cameras until I installed one on our house, so it caught nothing specific to our incident. Down the street, these people supposedly broke into a car as well, but the camera on their house was unable to see anything. Dang. Here's where the fun begins. Fast forward a couple of months, after nothing happened, I decided to install a new dash cam in my car. I found a good one that uses very little power off the battery, and it can activate if there's any bumps to the car, even if the car's off. It just needs to be wired straight to the battery for this. It's a thinkware. A few days later, we got a violation notice for our mailbox being crooked. It wasn't crooked much, but I do remember it recently having an angle. Odd. I mean, I could just fix it, but my car was aiming straight at the mailbox. I'm thinking, no, this could not be possible. It only records if there's a bump. I take out the memory card, and apparently I either didn't configure it correctly, but it was recording the whole time. It never went into sleep mode. I watched as the investigator walks up to the mailbox and pushes it crooked, and then writes down on his tablet his findings and takes a picture for his records. I am appalled at what I see. I have the proof that I needed. Now, for the malicious compliance. They wanted us to come to the board meeting and present what is going on at our address. We haven't told them yet that we had the pictures, but to summarize real fast how our HOA works, the board hires an outside company to do the grunt work. Let's call it Bentry Management. We go to the meeting and we sit down. Bentry Management has the one in control of our account, and I swear to you, she looked like a Karen, so the name fits for her. As time goes by in the meeting, we get to discuss what's happening at our house. We present the timelines and tell them about the truck being smashed, and just 2 days later, we get a letter. We ask what dates the investigator was out for that time. Karen refuses to answer it. She argues ignorantly that we should keep better care of our stuff, as if it was our fault. Then comes the mailbox incident. We tell her that we have reasons to believe that the investigator is the one causing all the damages to our property and is harassing us. Karen denies this and says that that's impossible and that she knows him personally. "Oh, is that so?" I ask. She says, "Yes, why?" I then pull out my laptop out of my book bag that I had been hiding, open it up to the video file already loaded, and show it to the entire board. "Enter Exhibit A," I said out loud and played the video. Karen's face is bright red. She says that that's not her investigator. I then also pulled out the letter about the mailbox, which was complete with date. It matches the cooked on timestamp on the video. She still tries to claim it's not them. No, it's a coincidence. I'm sorry, but you have a vandal and it's not us. It's not? I let the video play, knowing that she's falling into a pit hard right now. As the man walks toward my car, you can see plain as day, see Bentry Management on his shirt. She's no longer red now. She's white as a ghost. The board looks over at her and asks what she has to say about this. Karen is silent and has nothing except a few noises, which I assume was her brain trying to comprehend what just happened. I then proceed to bring up a previous case, which I happen to remember before we left for the meeting, where we had a grass violation beside our house. Now, this area that they were claiming was actually not visible from the sidewalk due to the house's shape. I asked point blank, has at any time, your investigators walked on our property illegally trespassing? Knowing as, per their rules, they aren't allowed to do that. Karen is visibly shaking now and mutters out, No, of course not, with her head down, unable to maintain eye contact with me. She probably feels that I have more evidence, but unfortunately I didn't. So I ask again. She asks, why? Our neighbor, who are lawyers literally next door to us where the side of this wall was, stands up and says, actually, that's not true. I have witnessed one of your investigators go between our houses and poke around the trash bins. Bingo! I didn't even realize she had this information. I couldn't have asked for better timing. Karen, at this point, just starts arguing with our neighbors about no proof. The board proceeds to apologize for the incident, and they were going to discuss what is going to happen in the future about this. At that point, the meeting is over. A month passes, and we get a letter that a new person will be in charge for Bentry Management and new investigators. She was fired that night. Since she was fired, my father tells me that we only get the occasional blip of errors, but they correct it immediately, and they don't bother us really anymore. See, the thing I love so much about this is that the HOA Karen is so confident that she's doing it right, and the other people in this nasty little HOA scheme think that they're getting away with everything, moving the mailbox, this and that, and on top of this, the guy was friends with the father. Like, how cool is that? So he got out that way, recorded unknowingly by the investigator that happening, bringing all the evidence to Karen in the courtroom as a surprise. She has nothing to say for herself. I mean, what can you say when you have literal freaking proof that that's what they're doing? And then the lawyer stands up, like, to add insult to injury to HOA Karen here, just completely, even without proof. It doesn't matter at this point. Karen is cooked, and the lawyer just helps out, adds icing to the cake, adds salt to the chili of Karen. I don't even know at this point. All I do know is that HOA Karen got messed up. And again, that's what we like to see here, right? Let me know what you think in the comments section. Become the worst neighbor and HOA board member ever? Lose your job and HOA. Posted by Dogalagapoo. Let me start by saying, Never purchase a house in an HOA. It is a complete mess that should be regulated and illegal. If I knew about HOAs when I bought my first home, I would have never purchased my first home in one. Me and my wife purchased our first home when we were 24 and 25. We spent months looking at houses and areas and tried to find a forever home in a good district for potential future kids and so on. We finally found a perfect one at a decent price. At first, everything was great. Super nice neighborhood and decent neighbors. Well, a few months after buying the house, we rented an RV to go on a trip, and we parked it in the driveway for the 3 days leading up to the trip so we could pack it and so I could learn how half the things in it worked. Well, this is when we learned that HOAs are absolutely crazy, and our neighbor was on the board of our local HOA. Within an hour of it being parked, he got home and stormed over, demanding that we remove it from his neighborhood or he would have it towed and fine us for every hour it was there. Myself, being the average and normal person, told him kindly to screw off and to get out of my driveway, and told him if he returns, I'll call the cops because he was screaming like a madman inches from my face. About 3 hours later, a big rig tow truck shows up, and he walked up like he was a god and handed me a plain envelope with a letter inside that pretty much said, "By the order of the HOA, this RV is to be towed," and a fine of $1,500 for violating their rules. While Mr. Crazy board member might not listen to reason, the tow truck guy they found wasn't so fond of entering my driveway and towing a vehicle when I told him that if he comes on the property, I'll call the cops. Once the tow truck driver decided that he's done being involved in this mess and he left, the neighbor goes even more crazy and storms off. I call my friend to get his dad's number because he's an attorney to ask him about this insane letter and the fine I just received and to ask him some legal advice. After speaking to his father, he told me to come down, write him a $500 check, and bring along all the papers that I received when purchasing the home and the current letter that I just received. The next day, he had a very friendly letter sent to my neighbor and the HOA board, basically telling my neighbor to screw himself in legal terms and to leave us and our property alone. I then continued to receive fines of $1,500 a day in plain envelopes not postmarked stuffed into my mailbox that I then turned over to my friend's father, and each time he sent another set of letters and contacted USPS to report the incidents. Turns out, putting mail into people's mailbox is a crime. Who knew? Well, we decided to go on our week-long trip across the state and mildly, forget about it all. Kind of upset that I had to spend $500 to have an attorney send letters, but that's what they do. Fast forward to us returning from the trip and the RV back in our driveway for 2 days so we can unload and clean and then return it. Again, each day, more envelopes stuffed into our mailbox, and more visits to our attorney, and more letters sent, and more incidents reported to the U.S. Postal Service. Well, here is where the fun really begins. Turns out, Mr. Crazy finally gives me a summons to appear before the board. My attorney said this is crazy illegal because what they've done is use what looks like an actual legal document improperly to summon me to the board. Another $500 to the attorney, and we wait for the date that they made, a Tuesday at 10 a.m. They attempt to keep my attorney out of the room on some board privacy rule, but they quickly shut the heck up when he begins going over their own rules that they are violating to them. Deep in this HOA book are some very nicely worded rules and stuff outlining about what makes board members ineligible and how they cannot serve if they commit certain infractions. Well, guess what Mr. Crazy Neighbor has done? Committed several of them, all documented. Also, the cherry on top is that if 51% of the HOA members vote to dissolve the HOA, it all goes away. Well, it happens that my wife worked part-time from home during this mess and had all the free time in the world to begin a Disband the HOA campaign. Over the course of the next 2 months, she went around and really began to get to know our neighborhood really well. Turns out, a lot of people dislike the HOA and the power-hungry seniors who act like dictators that run it. The HOA attempted to stall everything by holding no meetings, another HOA violation, and began their own campaign trying to change HOA rules to keep from being ousted, and a fairly racist flyer and letter to everyone explaining the dangers of not having an HOA and all the black people, African American and Mexican people, that will move in and take over or sell drugs and so on, that our houses would become much less valuable and everything else they could try. Turns out, it's extremely fun to use someone else's rules against them. The neighborhood even started a fund that paid us back what it cost us to get the attorney started and the continued costs that he had. A few weeks after their failed fear campaign and being forced to hold a meeting, a vote was called by using their own rules. The HOA was no more, and all the remaining funds were to be dispersed back to the homeowners and the members equally. This never happened. Turns out, somehow, the HOA used all their funds in the course of the last 2 months. About half of the former board members sold their homes and moved, including Mr. Crazy Neighbor. I've spent 3 hours trying to find old news articles because it was reported on mostly due to the racist letters by the HOA, but it was too long ago to find anything. Moral of this whole mess: don't buy a home in an HOA, and if you do, plan to hire an attorney. See, I like the due diligence that OP did here to really just research and find out the real rules and not just fall into their fear and scare tactics. They tried to scare OP out of this with this whole RV thing. And I mean, literally, if you got $1,500 fines in the mail every single day, that would wear down most people. It honestly would. I know I'd be like, oh crap, man. But this was not a worry for our OP. And then he went on the attorney and took the whole legal route, really doubling down and knocking it out. And then it turns out that these guys are sending some really horrible actions and words to other races. That's terrible. And you know what happens? They get shut down, moved out of the area, can't even hear from them, can't find them anymore. HOA's gone and disabled. All the Karens and Kevins are out of here. Way to go, OP. HOA board tries to force me to remove my trampoline. I get them removed from the board instead. Posted by Hi Internet Friend. Hello. I put a trampoline in my backyard in early 2017. I have 3 young boys and we've enjoyed it immensely. My neighbor, the HOA president at the time, went to sell his house in the spring of 2018, and his realtor said that the trampoline in my backyard might be a detriment to getting top dollar for his home. So he convinced the neighbor on the other side of my house to complain as well. Out of the blue, I received a message from the HOA property manager that the neighbors complained and that I would need to submit a form to get it approved. Intermission. What's sad is that I was friendly with both of these people. They had been in my home. They could have talked to me face to face. With one of the neighbors, I paid for our shared fence at her request, since her neighbor on her other side wouldn't contribute to their shared fence, another board member and human piece of garbage. I would have been willing to dig a hole for the trampoline to hide it more, or to purchase a new one with elastic bands rather than springs to make it quieter. Both of those options are cheaper than getting a lawyer. But nobody asked. Nobody came to me to have a face-to-face, heart-to-heart discussion about their concerns. A few ironies. These are 5-bedroom homes. Clearly, people with kids are gonna move in, and they're gonna be noisy in their backyard with or without play equipment. The guy who sold his home smoked like a chimney. I don't think my trampoline should have been his top concern. The people who ended up buying his home are a great family with 2 kids who don't care about toys in other people's backyards. My neighbors have raised kids to adulthood, one of them 2 very active boys. When I pointed this out to her, the words that actually came out of her mouth were, "I know it's challenging to raise boys, but we are at different stages of our lives," as if that justified her trying to screw me. Back to the story. I filled out the form and then sent it in. The Architectural Review Committee denied it a month later. I appealed the decision, and then I met with the board in August. They sent me a letter and said it was in violation. I asked which rules I violated. They never sent me a letter, so then I asked again a week ago. The property manager was adamant that she had sent the letter, but I asked for proof. She forwarded an email where she put my name in the to field after the fact. I had a strong suspicion that it was after the fact due to the following reasons. An HOA meeting was mentioned that never took place. The responses to my questions varied in color, indicating that they had been edited at different times. She responded immediately to my request for proof by indicating she would forward the email, but then took an hour, presumably editing a draft that she never sent. She cited a rule early in the email, but then cited an additional rule later that superseded the first. The first cited rule could have simply been omitted. The message was not marked as forwarded message at the top, and the sent time didn't include seconds. None of these things are a smoking gun, but they are suspicious. I asked the other people in the to field if they received a copy of the email with my name in the address field. The only honest member of the board replied that he hadn't. The rest remained silent because they didn't want to look like they and the property manager had dropped the ball. Intermission. If you're curious why the board didn't like my trampoline, here is the rationale provided in the letter that was never sent. Due to the close proximity of the homes to each other and the small yards, the trampoline is unsightly to the homes surrounding it. Realtors for those homes surrounding you have stated that it is a detraction to selling homes and is lowering the home values of those around it. There have also been neighbor complaints regarding the noise level, which creates those homeowners to be unable to enjoy their homes. They are also unable to use certain portions of their homes while the trampoline is being used. My kids all weigh under 35 pounds. They go to bed at 7 p.m. and they don't jump on the trampoline in the morning before 10 a.m. My neighbors bought homes 10 feet away from mine. What did they expect? Back to the story. The year-end meeting was scheduled for yesterday, and 4 board positions were up for election. I got 3 of my friends on the street to run with me. I went door to door every day for a week, and I spoke with the majority of homeowners about their discontent with the street. I got a third of the community to sign proxy forms stating that I would vote on their behalf. I went to the meeting last night and put these fools on blast. I listed calmly all the ways the current board was failing the community and my plan to right their wrongs. The vote was a landslide in favor of myself and my friends getting elected. One awful board member remains, but he is the minority. We fired the property manager who was uncommunicative and flat out dishonest. The trampoline endures. The only bummer is now I have to manage a street which includes some legit crazy people. But this whole episode has convinced my wife that we will never live in an HOA again, which I count as a huge victory in addition to the trampoline remaining where it is today. You know, I think we see time and time again, the HOAs are trying to take advantage of the members. They try to put fear in their hearts and strike with that fear to make them say, okay, fine, I just give up, you win, don't hurt me, don't do anything. They'll even get others in on this just to rope them all in and try to convince them that it's wrong. They'll gaslight, they'll gang up on you, there'll be narcissist behavior to convince you that you are wrong and they are right, and then gang up on you there. But OP had enough, knew the reasons why this trampoline was okay, knew the falsehoods in that email and was able to bust it out. It was no smoking gun, but it was enough to say, hey, this is not right. And then OP convinced his wife that they were the winners, and then boom, just delivered that just pro revenge. Way to go, OP. While we're on the subject of homeowners associations, here's the story of how my parents' HOA tried to use a 40-year-old rule to stop them from repairing hurricane damage and got the shaft for their trouble. Posted by Deleted. A few months back, as you all may remember, Florida got pretty beaten up by a couple of hurricanes. My folks live down there, and while none of the damage that they sustained was life-alteringly horrible or home-destroying, homeowners insurance kicked in and they had some water damage through the roof. They also needed a new one because of all the shingles that had come off and the debris that had punctured it. My folks looked through roofing options and determined that a metal roof would be a great option to reduce damage and maintenance on their home. Plus, it would serve as a more energy-efficient option with passive solar collection and fewer thermal losses in the summer and winter. It is more expensive, but my dad was basically r/personal finance incarnate when I was growing up, and he's in his 60s and he's finally concluded that he has FU money so long as that community is concerned, so the roof was a good investment. It looked like a win-win-win with that roof. Then they reviewed the HOA and saw that, as of 1989, metal roofs are prohibited in the neighborhood, subject to fines and mandatory removal. Reviewing the bylaw further showed that it was clearly referring to older, crappier tin roofs, not a proper metal one like today's market provides, which looks great and has all of those other benefits. My folks wanted to play by the rules though, and called up the HOA to explain the situation. HOA was friendly and said that they would be looking into that bylaw and that my folks weren't the only ones who requested that they be allowed to have a metal roof. My parents couldn't get a roofing contractor in a few months anyway. There was too much demand since everyone else's roof got wrecked, so they waited a few weeks and got nothing new out of the HOA. Tried again a few weeks later. Nothing. After about 2 months of this, they said screw it and started construction on the metal roof. Popular opinion in the neighborhood was on their side, and the roof was covered with a tarp that wouldn't last forever. The new roof got installed over the course of a few days, and then we found out the HOA's crappiness. The neighborhood has a nice brick sign out front that says, "Welcome to Neighborhood Name." It's very classy, very nice, and was very damaged in a hurricane. The HOA was strapped for money due to other repairs and dues, and some prick had the bright idea to impose as many fines as they could on the neighborhood to pay for these repairs, starting with my folks. They served my folks with a letter claiming that they were in violation of the HOA and demanded a $25,000 fine and that they remove it, which is, of course, absurd. My poor mother is very much a play-by-the-rules sort, and she was worried sick. Dad's ex-Navy and a contract negotiator. He essentially checked his 60-year-old knuckles and said, "Oh, you little jerks want to play, do ya?" So they set about researching and making some calls. Poor mom kept waking up at 1 a.m., unable to sleep, and I felt terrible for her as she went through this. But then they had a breakthrough. A few weeks after being served, I'm fuzzy on the timeline since I don't live in Florida, it may have been less, there was essentially a burn them at the stake meeting of the HOA, where my parents could defend themselves for an absurdly short amount of time, and the HOA could rip into them for daring to defy their wrath. So my mom, because she's more social and has a better temper than Dad, she comes up to speak and lets the HOA know that they can't do this. HOA smirks and says, they sure can. They have a 40-year-old statute saying that they can. Mom says, you do, but I have state law on my side which supersedes your statute. Turns out there's a law in Florida stating that an HOA, or well, really any regulation, cannot be used to prevent an eco-friendly improvement from taking place on anyone's private property. And wouldn't you know it, the passive solar system of the metal roof counts as an eco-friendly improvement. Turns out the roofing contractors have dealt with similar stuff before. When Dad mentioned what was going on to them, the contracting officer pulled out a few letters of accreditation and a few past cases where the court had determined that their product was eco-friendly and forced the HOA to pay all legal fees. My mom produced all of this for the crappy HOA, who had to admit that this was, in fact, ironclad. Strapped for money as they were, they couldn't afford to pay a lawyer. HOA head growls, "Is that all?" Mom turns up the sweetness to 11. No, I see in the bylaws that we can vote to impeach the board members at any HOA meeting and to elect their replacements. I move to impeach all of you. I nominate my husband," and she rattles off a list of names, and HOA is stunned. While Dad looked into the legal, Mom looked into the new neighborhood. Popular opinion was on their side, and the hearing was public for the neighborhood. Mom convinced a majority of the homeowners to attend and remove the board for their crappy policy. With that, my parents are now on the all-new board, and Dad is putting his contract negotiation skills and own craftsmanship skills to work repairing the front entrance. And metal roofs are now allowed by the all-new HOA. Just when the HOA thinks they had it, they thought they were smart, reaching back 40 years into the past, which is not that long, mind you, I'm only in my mid-30s, and then they're like, "Oh no, you can't do this, we have this rule." Well, they go to the state, which overrules that HOA. They say, "No, you can't do that." HOA's like, and then of course, they step in, and all this without a lawyer. They did their due diligence on their own, saved that money that they would not be able to have the lawyer with, and then not only impacted their home, fixed their situation, came out the winner, but changed the HOA board, getting rid of everyone and bringing themselves and all the good people on there, thereby not only helping themselves, but the entire neighborhood at its core and total future of it, with a good guy HOA that has the best interest of all the neighbors, every one of them in mind. Way to go, OP, and Mom and Dad. HOA member doesn't know the rules as well as he thinks, posted by Spec97. This story primarily takes place between me and Crappy Neighbor, who is a member of my community's HOA. Sorry if it's a bit long. As a bit of background, me and my 3 roommates moved into a housing community that's basically just a bunch of cookie-cutter townhomes. All of these homes have garages that open onto streets that wind through the community. This is important later, with the front door opening to a path on the other side of your house. There are also some free parking spots on the edge of the community where there are no houses. When we first moved in, we quickly found out that parking could be a bit of a pain during the day, especially when people had guests during the weekend. Now my roommates and I, we admittedly have more cars than the average family. Because we usually have to commute for work, we each have one. We try to make parking easier by using the garage, but we all have tons of sporting equipment, so we can only usually get one car in the garage. When all the parking in the free spots is full, we just park our cars right up against the garage and leave them there during the day or overnight. We'd seen other neighbors do it, and it still left ample room for people driving on the street to get by. Well, one day, Crappy Neighbor came up while my roommates and I are in the garage organizing some stuff and tells us that we can't park there overnight as it's against community rules. Before we had a chance to respond, he added, "And if you do it again, I will personally make sure you're towed." His first comment was pretty reasonable. We just moved in and didn't know that rule. But his second comment just really made him sound like a butt, and he wasn't really necessary. One of my roommates simply responded that we didn't know as we just moved in and we wouldn't park there overnight anymore. Well, Crappy Neighbor, clearly trying to assert his dominance, responded with, "Good, you'd better not, because I'll be watching." Well, from then on, we did follow those rules. If we parked in the front of our garage during the day, we would make sure to move before we went to sleep. This worked out for a while until one fateful day. One of my roommates stopped by quickly after work to grab some dinner and clothes before heading to his girlfriend's. This was around 7 p.m., so he just parked up against the garage as it would be quicker than the parking spaces. Plus, it was early enough that he didn't think he'd get towed. Around 8 p.m., he went to head out and his car was gone. Guess who was there though? Crappy Neighbor standing right outside. Immediately he said to my roommates, Told you were going to get towed if you parked here again. Crappy neighbor and my roommate argued for a bit before my roommate came back inside and calls the car lot. Well, it ends up they're closed, so he'll have to get his car in the morning. The kicker? They're going to charge him an overnight fee. All in all, it comes out to $500, which isn't a small amount of money for us. This neighbor has been a butt to us since we moved in, and even though it wasn't my car that was towed, I took this personally. To make sure we didn't get towed again, we decided to read the community rules, and lo and behold, we found out that the street in front of the garage is actually considered a fire lane, and no one is supposed to park there at any point during the day. Between crappy neighbor treating us like crap and the fact that we could get him yelling at his wife every night, not a big detail to the story, but just wanted to say to add to my point that this guy just sucked, I start to plan my revenge. Since quarantine started, I've been able to work from home, and my desk conveniently looks out onto the street between the houses. This means that I can clearly see crappy neighbor's garage. I start to take note of when he parks his car out in front of the garage, and for about 2 weeks, I noticed that he would come home at around 1 p.m. and leave again at 2 p.m. On the 3rd week, I decided that I would begin the revenge. One Monday, true to his schedule, he stopped by around 1. After about 10 minutes, I gave the tow company a call and said that he was parked in the fire lane and if they could come and remove his car. 20 minutes later, a tow truck rolled up, hooked his car up, and towed it off. About 15 minutes later, crappy neighbor came out and I could hear him start to yell back into his house, presumably at his wife. He then left and didn't come back until later that evening after he'd gotten his car. Now, it was funny to do this, and I made sure to send snaps to my roommates who don't work from home, but I wasn't done yet. See, this jack butt apparently didn't learn the first time because literally the next day he parks in front of his garage again. What do? Well, the exact same thing as the day before, of course. Again, crappy neighbor comes out, realizes his car is gone, yells at his wife, and then goes to get it. Now, after this time, he's a bit smarter and parks in an actual spot before going in to get his lunch or whatever it is that he does in there midday. He does this for about 2 weeks before he decides that it's okay to park in front of his garage again. Well, who is still sitting at their desk every day and notices this immediately? Well, me, of course. And being the concerned resident that I am, I immediately call the tow company and off his car goes again. And again, this is met with yelling. I wish that this had a more satisfying ending, but after this 3rd time, I decided that I would stop because I genuinely felt bad for his wife, who he seemed to do most of the yelling at, as if it was her fault that he was a dummy. What I can tell you is that it definitely cost him over $1,000. If he hadn't have gotten my roommate's car towed, then we wouldn't have ever even found out that this fun little rule existed. The best part was that a number of my neighbors would have their cars parked there at the same time, and they never have their cars towed, which made it all the better when his was. We've had a number of other encounters with him in that time since this happened, and I have another story that involves the actual HOA that I'll probably write later. That one is still ongoing though, so we'll see how it ends up. The nice part about this story is that OP, him and his friends, they do a mistake, they mess up. We've all done it before, right? And then there's just like, oh, hey guys, you need to fix this. All right, cool, we will. Well, it turns out, dude is a jerk and then ends up violating the own rules of the HOA community. And you know what? He just gets owned, and $1,000 is a lot of money. Really, that's 4 figures, and the guy is so stupid he doesn't know what's going on. Oh, my car gets towed, I'm gonna go get it back again and again and again, and blames his wife. What a narcissist, what a toxic person. And why does he never catch on? Because he is failing to know his own community's rules, and OP completely wins and wrecks him. Now, there was originally going to be an update to this, but I haven't seen anything there, so unfortunately, we don't have the complete ending here. Something a little different. One fire department's humble fight against an HOA, posted by Zerbo. Just throwing out this story because I know you folks will get a kick out of it. While I am fortunate enough to not live in a neighborhood with an HOA, I'm a firefighter for a suburban district that is chock full of them. Big ones, small ones, old ones, brand new ones. HOAs frickin' everywhere. For the most part, they aren't a hassle. They gate off their private roads, but as long as they put a sensor on it or a padlock that uses our standard department key, it's not an issue. Enter the Views. The Views are condos built in the late 70s, and as far as I can tell, the only view they have is of a freeway on-ramp and some eucalyptus trees. The Views were built along a narrow road that starts and ends off of the main road, making one big loop about a quarter-mile long with a couple cul-de-sacs branching off. It's important to note that the driveways for each end of the loop are about 30 feet apart off of the same road. The Views have a lot of older residents, so we're there semi-frequently for medical aids, people smoking out their kitchens when they forget about the food they left on the stove, and even the occasional structure fire. Responding there is annoying because they built speed bumps about every 25 feet along this loop. So once you're in the Views, you're not getting anywhere fast. Annoying, yeah, but it's a private road, so they can technically build as many speed bumps as they want. Enter the chain. About a third of the way along the loop from the first driveway, there is a chain across the road, padlocked to a steel pole on one side. It's a generic master brand lock to which we do not have a key. Why is it there? What does it do? Why would anyone build something like that? The answer to all three of these questions is, who the heck knows? The chain has been in place as long as I've been working at this department, and nobody can tell me exactly why it's still a thing. Phone calls to the HOA regarding the chain went unanswered and unreturned. The problem with the chain is its location. If we're responding to an address that's closer to the first driveway but just past the chain, we would have to go the long way around to get there. The operative word here is would. When COVID was really ramping up in the early 2020, we were at the Views a lot, sometimes 2 or 3 times a shift. Approaching from the main road, we always take the first driveway because heck, taking that long way, someone called 911, we're going to get there quickly. That's what we're paid to do. So when the address came up on the other side of the chain, it was unanimously decided that we take the path of least resistance. Enter the bolt cutters. Every time we needed to get to an address past the chain, I would hop out of the engine, grab the bolt cutters, and snip a link. Chain goes down, engine and ambulance go through. Simple solution. After about a week of this and many mysteriously replaced chains, the enigma of the chain was finally revealed. One night, as I have a hapless link firmly in the grasp of my bolt cutters, I hear a shrill shriek. Stop! A middle-aged woman comes speed-walking out of the condo right next to the chain. I'm the HOA president, that's there for a reason. I want to hear all about that reason, but we're here for a response, and the clock is ticking. Snap! Another link is broken, the chain falls slack, and onward we go. We resolve that we'll stop by her unit after we clear the call to let her know what a nuisance the chain is, and that something needs to be done about it. This course of action was ultimately unnecessary, as HOA president took it upon herself to huff and puff after us as we drove away, and came speed-walking up again as we pulled up to the response address. I went inside with the ambulance crew, but I could hear her shrieking at my captain outside. We wrap up the call, get the patient loaded into the ambulance, and she's still going off on him. What it basically boiled down to was that she took it upon herself to install the chain because she didn't want people using the road as a thoroughfare. The reasoning behind this is an utter mystery to a rational mind because it's a loop that begins and ends on the same road, 30 feet apart. No one is using the Views as a thoroughfare. The chain got installed where it is because that's where her condo is. She demands that we just go the long way for addresses past the chain, and we explain that it hinders response time. She does not accept this. It takes my captain asking her that if her unit was on fire and we were responding from the other direction down the main road, would she want us to take an extra minute going the long way, or just cut the chain and get to her unit faster? She acquiesces that she had not considered this, but also refuses to do anything about the chain. War it is, then. Every opportunity we got, we cut that frickin' chain. Never maliciously, only out of necessity, but it was necessary to the point where it was getting comical. A pile of snapped chain links lay discarded in the gutter. She made numerous attempts at peace. What if we just notified her when we needed it unlocked? No. What if we just cut a link on one end instead of down the middle? Sorry, middle is faster. What if she just gave us a key to the lock? Sorry, but if it's not the department-issued lock, we're not going to take the time to dig through the key box. One day, as I hopped out to gleefully cut the chain as always, something was different. Zip ties. Tired of buying new chains, or perhaps the chain fund had dried up, HOA president had resorted to zip tying the chain back together where we had cut it. She even attached a tag saying, "Fire Department, cut zip tie only." After consulting with my captain, we decided upon the most prudent course of action. I didn't have a pair of scissors on me, but I sure as heck had a pair of bolt cutters. Snap! Dead center in one of the remaining links of chain. And so it went. As the chain got gradually shorter and shorter and became more zip tie than chain, despite her rushing out of her condo when the engine pulled up to the chain, we were always faster with the bolt cutters. The chain has been fully replaced a couple of times, and the same cycle has ensued, until one day, last week, when everything changed. Enter the gate. As we responded to the views, we pulled up to the chain. I already had the bolt cutters out and ready to go, only to be greeted with the most unexpected surprise. Where the chain had once stretched across the road, impotent in the face of our departmental onslaught, now loomed a 2-arm swinging gate. A beefy one, too. They definitely assessed some new HOA fees to pay for this beast. On cue, out came HOA president. This time, she said nothing, only crossed her arms in defiance and looked on with a smirk. I assessed this new obstacle for a second. Too thick to ram it through, plus that would damage the engine. Tubular steel modeled on concrete anchored post, so no just lifting the gate off the hinge. "Looks like you'll be taking the long way from now on," she said, clearly having played this out in this exact scenario in her head countless times since having the gate installed. And she would be right, except the arms of the gate were secured by a length of chain wrapped around and padlocked. I looked straight at HOA president as I lined up the bolt cutters on a chain link and the padlock shackle. Snap. I have never, ever seen someone visibly deflate the way the HOA president did at that moment. I pushed the gate open and the engine drove through. As I climbed back into the engine, I heard her call out, "At least close it behind you." I probably don't need to tell you that I left that witch wide open. The icing on this cake is that we sent out fire marshals to check it out. While the chain technically met the definition for impeding emergency vehicle access, we let it slide due to it being so easily bypassed. The gate, however, was a massive violation of county codes. Despite being a private road, the number of residents along the loop in the views stipulated that any gate shall be automatically opening and have an emergency vehicle sensor. The gate fits neither of those criteria, so boom, 30-day notice to remove that crap or face massive fines from the county for impeding emergency vehicle access. So, in summary, we waged a years-long battle against one HOA president's desperate grasp to control a problem that never existed in the first place. And if that doesn't capture HOAs in a nutshell, I don't know what does. This is so genius because this fits under malicious compliance, doing exactly what he's supposed to, pro-revenge, and then just Karens and everything. They cut the chain. The lady puts this up out of spite. That's literally out of spite is all it is. And then just continually maybe thinking that they're just going to make them stop after a while. But no, they have people to save, right? I mean, come on. So they put the gate up thinking, oh, that's going to be it, right? They put all this money into it, all this time and effort, and all using the one brain cell that the Karens have here to get this gate up. Somehow it's still working after all the raging they're doing. And then it's against all these violations. They clearly didn't think that through because they clearly think nothing through. And then OP just rams through it the proper way and boom, just takes the HOA president down and everything just falls apart in his favor. That is an awesome story. I really liked it. Let me know in the comments if you did too, because I did. HOA wants a war. Posted by Vlad666. I live in a rural area on a family farm. The farm next to ours was sold to a developer who built a bunch of mini mansions that have an HOA. Now, the mini mansions back up to my family farm. I get letters every week from the HOA complaining about the tractor sitting in the field at the front of my property, where it can be seen from the street. We're working that field and the tractor is necessary. I've had them complain about my barns, outbuildings, the sound of the large tractor when I'm seeding, and once have my grandfather saw some people that he didn't recognize checking out the barn. He went out with his double-barrel 12 gauge to see what they were up to. Guess what? They were HOA inspectors who declared their right to inspect the building to make sure it met HOA rules. My grandfather is not politically correct, and I was pleased that he restrained himself from using 00 buckshot to register his opinion of trespassers. And yes, our property is fenced and posted. I was informed by the HOA that they were going to fine me $1,000 a day until the offending striations and machinery were removed. I informed them that I and my property are not part of the HOA, and if their inspectors set foot on my property again, I would have them arrested or let my grandfather loose with his double barrel. They went nuts and called the county sheriff's office. Having lived here for generations, I knew the sheriff. He came out and he asked me what was going on. I told him. He also visited the HOA and heard their demands that he take immediate action to protect their inspectors. They were less than happy when he informed them that since my property is posted and fenced, I was well within my rights to not allow them on my land. Also, because of our livestock, a 12 gauge is not unreasonable because of predators. He also informed them that, as I am not a member of the HOA, I have no requirement to allow them on my land, and if he gets another call, he will arrest the inspectors for criminal trespass. I have since been sent a letter from the HOA's lawyer telling me to just cease and desist all operations until they get a court date because they are suing me for damaging the value of their property. I forwarded it to my lawyer, who, after he got done laughing, was amazed. First, because a court has to issue a cease and desist order, and secondly, we've been here farming for 4 generations. I have spoken with the HOA board and told them to leave us alone, or we'll be more than happy to play our lawyer is better than their lawyer. I was informed that the developer of their property assured them I'd be selling my land for development to an organization like his that has since resolved into the ether. They were more than a little surprised when I told them that we're currently training the 5th generation to take over, and we have no intention of selling our farm, period. Seems the developer left them with the impression that I was selling my property to be developed like my neighbors had been, only to make his money and run. God have mercy on overzealous HOAs. I mean, just look at this. They are just trespassing on the land, first of all. On a fenced land, mind you, with posted signs, making threats like, oh, we're going to take over, blah, 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 rule the world like the HOAs think they always do. And then they ran out, and they just try to go back with no evidence, with no power. They are instituting this own power within their own minds, and then executing on it, thinking that's going to matter in their imaginary world, because that's what a lot of Karens and Kevins do. They have this imaginary world that is not reality, and they try to run it. The lawyer comes in, he completely sets them straight, like very much so. And OP has 4 and 5 generations here. They're not moving them. They're just going to have their tractor. They're going to let it run, John Deere, whatever brand it is, and they will rule over this overzealous HOA. Way to go, OP. HOA unfairly fines my aunt for not shoveling her sidewalk. Posted by Stalin Plus Love, posted in FHOA. Fun fact, the F stands for friendly. Not really. Since it's winter in the northern hemisphere and we're getting our fair share of snow, I have a story from my aunt. My aunt lives in a gated community in the Pacific Northwest. She's at a higher altitude, so she gets a bit of snow. She's a nice lady, very active, and always helps other people. Her HOA is a drinking club, as she describes them, have a whole bunch of rules, some totally ridiculous, heavily enforced, and always changing. Usually, when rules are changed, they get posted on some online community bulletin board from the days of dial-up. Also, they like to fine and shame people. My aunt never attended meetings because she has, and I quote, no time for drinking and cigarettes. As per usual with a lot of bylaws, you have to clear the sidewalk in front of your house of snow and ice. My aunt, being the woman that she is, and living in a 55-plus community, she always shovels her walk, and then she salts it for ice. A couple of years ago, there was a heavier than usual snowfall, maybe over 20 inches in the higher elevations, with some warm days and then freezing temperatures for a few days after. So, for snowfall, she gets up early and shovels her sidewalk and her walk and sprinkles down some salt. It snows a few inches more, so in the later afternoon, she shovels the walk again and decides to salt again. She literally said she tossed a few handfuls of salt, and the neighbor across the street comes running out, demanding that she stop salting, and it's a violation of HOA rule whatever crap. It seems that a no salt rule was added to their book of great HOA rules. The reasoning is that the salt crystals are unsightly and posted on the unusable bulletin board from 1999, which at this point, the online bulletin board had been replaced by an under-maintenance error page for the past few months. So there was no way the drunken HOA rule changes could be relayed to the commoners. Well, my aunt apologizes, gets a warning for the first time that she salted, and a second for the handful of salt that she applied in the second salting, and then gets another warning for not properly clearing the sidewalk. Well, my aunt left maybe a strip of about 2 or 3 inches for about 2 feet on the edge of her sidewalk, which wasn't properly cleared of snow. Not a big deal, she made an excellent effort, but the HOA neighbor didn't think so. Next violation would be a fine. Also, she had to clean up all the rock salt with a broom. My aunt ended up getting the new HOA rules in writing from the HOA neighbor, which she read over and realized they only stated salt in the sidewalk snow shoveling rule, but nothing that blew salt-free ice melt. Also, it was stated that the sidewalk should stay free of ice at all times. Also, she read a bit deeper to learn that street and sidewalk cleaning is covered by the HOA twice a year or as needed. Instead of risking HOA wrath of fines and some public shaming because now it's near impossible to prevent the sidewalk from freezing up, she decides she will challenge the vodka-induced reasoning of the HOA and will use the blue non-salt ice melt to keep her sidewalk ice-free. The next day, after an overnight snowfall, she heads to the local hardware store to buy some blue non-salt ice melt, strikes up a conversation with the shop owner about her issue, who recommends these blue ice melting pellets, and throws in a bag of clay kitty litter on the house so she can, and I quote, stick it to them idiots. Now that afternoon, the temperature rises just above freezing, and there is a heavy wet snowfall of a few inches which hits the ground wet, melts, and refreezes when the temperatures go below freezing at nighttime. So instead of risking having a skating rink for a sidewalk, she clears the wet snow and then dumps a bunch of these blue ice melting pellets and a whole bunch of kitty litter. Overnight, it freezes. Next day, she has the most ice-free sidewalk in all of the neighborhood, and it's covered in ice melt pellets. Well, it rains that day. Her use of kitty litter and blue ice melt pellets don't go unnoticed by HOA neighbor. That afternoon, she is fined by the HOA officer in charge of fines for breaking rule #vodka or pound vodka, depends on what generation you're from, section stale cigarette smoke. She sees nothing wrong. The road is salted and sanded and it looks like a mess, so her sidewalk doesn't look too bad, all blue and gray speckled and ice-free. Then she gets a notice to clean up the salt, which she ignores because it's not salt she is using to de-ice her sidewalk, but blue salt-free ice melt pellets and clay kitty litter. Then that day it rained and then froze and continued to rain, and then snow caused everything to be covered in ice and snow the next morning. It was a disaster. My aunt cleared the snow from her sidewalk and applied more blue pellets and kitty litter, which wasn't a task because luckily she had already applied so much that there was already no ice on her sidewalk or snow. Everyone else in the neighborhood had to chip the underlayer of ice after they risked a horrific fall while clearing the top layer of snow. She was then fined again, while neighbors had to actually walk in the messy street in some parts because sidewalks in some spots were unwalkable. Warnings and fines were given to other unsuspecting neighbors who couldn't attend the HOA booze meetings and had mistakenly used salt or had not chipped and cleared all the sidewalk ice in an acceptable amount of time. The next few days were blue skies and below freezing with ice everywhere. Sidewalks had been chipped, but they iced up over time with a thin layer of slick ice called black ice. People were falling, and my aunt now had a couple of rogue neighbors using all types of non-salt ice melt. One guy made up a solution of brine and molasses, which he sprayed on and got great results. Others used sand, brine, non-salt ice melters, and even 15 gallons of wine, which turned into vinegar, was applied. The HOA's alcohol consumption probably increased as the officer fell on a patch of black ice out in front of his home, breaking his elbow while returning from delivering fines, warnings, and general nastiness. Eventually, the weather returned to above freezing levels and rain which washed away all the various ice-melting substances. The rogue neighbors gathered at my aunt's house, enjoying the tea and snacks. Among them was a man who used brine and molasses, who happened to have a license to practice law and was retired with nothing else better to do than to, and I quote, ruin the drunk, useless HOA at the next meeting, end quote. He then invited himself to the next meeting with a file folder of all the fines and warnings, with a statement of dispute for each one. Also brought his tablet to prove the online bulletin board wasn't working, which helped the case that the HOA was not providing proper means of communication to the residents, which meant that the residents could sign a petition to fire the standing HOA members and appoint an interim HOA until the election. My aunt was appointed treasurer, found the previous regime spent HOA funds at the liquor store. The retired lawyer president then went after the previous HOA for funds spent on booze, and they lived happily ever after. I mean, look, it is one thing to have just a stupid HOA rule, right? But when you're literally messing with life and limb with people, you are going to fall on ice. That's dangerous. I don't know if you've ever slipped on ice. You don't want to do it, okay? Do not recommend. You're going to go to the hospital. It sucks. But listen, you're just endangering the homeowners. I recently read a story where the HOA Karen president endangered the first responders and the homeowners. And that's just so stupid. Like, of all the rules to have, why this? And the other thing that I noticed from the story that I cannot help but mention in my comments here is that the hashtag vodka or pound sign vodka. I was reading that and I'm like, which generation are you from to know? I'm from the pound sign generation myself. Let me know where you're from yourself in the comments section. Love to talk to you there. How to get rid of an HOA, posted by Hickdell, also posted in r/friendly HOA. A good friend of mine has about 4 years ago inherited the house of his grandparents. He decided to live there for the time being till he's decided what to do with the house. He grew up in it, so he didn't really want to sell it. Not even a week after he moved in, he got a visit from a neighborhood committee. They said they are the 3 board members of the HOA, and they're here so he can sign his membership papers. They were extremely nosy and rude. For example, one tried to get into the garage without even so much as asking. When he stopped him and asked where he wanted to go, he had the audacity to say, "I need to check your garage. If everything there is in order, I have a right to do this bi-weekly, and denying me access is an offense that will cost a fine." He then had enough of their audacity and kicked him out of the house. While doing so, one of the board members shoved some papers into his face and told him that he needed to sign this right now. He would live there a week already, and the papers had to be signed before moving in. Once they were gone, he took a look at the papers. They were fluffing ridiculous and gave the HOA rights that were simply unfluffing real. They had, for example, a right to visit your home bi-weekly and check things like that you don't use the garage for, like storage. Don't have gasoline on containers in your garage, and the same goes for gas. You had to mow your lawn every week. Snow had to be shoveled every 2 hours when it snowed, starting at 5:00 in the morning. You could not park more than 1 car on your grounds except inside the garage, and a ton of other bull snot. A few days later, they came back and asked him why he didn't sign the papers yet. They also wanted to check the garage again. This time, he would not even let them in and told them he would never become a member of their stupid club. To them, that meant war. Within a week, they had sent him some fines north of $1,000. Some of them were for denying them access to his home, each worth $250. My friend simply did not take them serious and used their stupid letters to help fire his grill. Then came the day where they went extremely too far. He came back, and one of the board members had broken into his garage, stood in it, and was writing things down on his notepad. But that was not even the worst part. He had 2 wonderful oak trees in the front of his house. They had been planted by his great-grandparents when they were newlyweds and moved into the house. The HOA was in the process of taking them down. They had called a professional crew for this. One was already so damaged, basically all twigs were already down, it was just a stump that was left, and the other one they had just started with. He freaking lost it. He told the tree crew to stop the heck right now, explained to them that he was the owner and what they did was highly illegal. They had no idea, since the board member claimed that the trees were in violation of the rules, since supposedly too many leaves went to the neighbor's garden. He had told them that there was no legal reason to put them down, but the board member claimed that I'd given my okay because the trees were in violation of the rules of the HOA. He looked it up later. They actually had a bylaw that if a garden produces more than one 40-liter sack of leaves within 2 weeks, the garden owner needs to take down the offending trees within 2 weeks. He told them he would overlook them trespassing if they would be witnesses in court for him. Then he called the cops on the board members for trespassing, breaking and entering, and they actually had used a bolt cutter to get into the garage. He had always had it closed with a big freaking bike lock after they tried to get in twice before. The trial must have been glorious. Not only did they have to repay him for the lock in the tree, which was worth a crap ton of money, north of $50,000 if I remember right, plus damages for the second tree. He had a professional tree person look after it, so all the damage healed properly, which alone cost nearly $1,000. But these idiots actually thought the trial would have been unfair, and they tried to fight it, which probably cost them an additional $10,000 to $15,000 in lawyers and court costs. All in all, the trial must have cost them over $120,000. Then he went to civil court and sued them for emotional damage. He told them how much these trees meant to him, since his great-grandparents had planted them with seeds from the home country, and he really laid it out on as thick as he could. Plus, he felt threatened by the HOA and can hardly sleep because he always fears that they're going to try to get into his house. The court actually bought it, and they gave him $500,000 plus the cost for a state-of-the-art alarm system so he can feel safe again in his own home. So, put all together, he cost the HOA nearly $750,000. They had to file for bankruptcy and get a person to check the books so my friend would get his money. The best is for last. The mediator found out that these three pricks had been defrauding the HOA for well over 10 years and were giving out as many fines as they possibly could so they could use it to bolster their income. All three had to sell their houses so they could pay out my friend. And now he is, for most people, one of the favorite people living there, and he constantly gets invited over for grilling and whatnot. You see, most people never wanted the HOA in the first place, but the board member practically forced them to sign the contract, claiming it would not be optional, and if they did not sign before moving, it would be a $500 fine. Only 6 of the over 50 members actually wanted this HOA, and people think they did get part of the action as reward for spying out on their neighbors to find violations. Liam the Bobbit says, favorite story yet, and holy crap, these three musketeers rolling in on their high horses, getting nearly $1 million in collective damages, selling their houses, ruining the entire HOA, just burning it to the ground. I mean, if we're just being honest here, it literally got torched, like arson level crap right here. I mean, did it not? And then just comes out as a favorite. He is the town favorite for standing up to the bullies and just completely knocking them on their butt and then kicking that out from under them too. OP, I don't know what to say other than this is nuclear. There's not even a word for this, okay? It's beyond nuclear revenge, and you have completely obliterated everything about this HOA. It is now an A because there is no man left in it. Way to go, OP. Let me know what you think in the comments too, or if you're listening on the podcast, let me know what you think. I fought the HOA and I won. Posted by This One Time on Reddit. This story takes place in Ontario, in the city of Kawartha Lakes, one of the worst municipalities in all of Ontario in which to live. There's poverty, crime, drug addiction, a culture of prideful ignorance, and die-hard partisan voters that will vote against their best interests time and time again. And if you paid attention to the news recently, their OPP detachment shot and killed a 1-year-old. The city council are looting their tax base to provide free educational opportunities for unqualified staffers they hired, holding secret meetings behind the public's back, and in one case spent $140,000 to fight a lawsuit that was levied against them after they blocked a brand new business's access road because some city council members owned competing businesses. They were fined $70,000 and spent another $70,000 of taxpayer dollars to appeal and lose. That's all backstory. Suffice it to say, it's a city run by uneducated rubes and inhabited by the most apathetic voters I've ever encountered. My old man was an original property owner of the unassumed road for 50 plus years. For the uninitiated, this means that although the city owned the road, they are not responsible for maintenance and grooming and so on beyond the scope of the limited service agreement that they made with a single property owner who, we later found out, forged signatures claiming he represented the entire road. The LSA basically meant that they would do 2 gradings per year, though they only actually provided 1. About 20 years ago, some cityots, or city idiots, moved up on the road and decided that they would create an HOA. They didn't get insured, they didn't incorporate, and they thought they could go around forging signatures on city documents and charging residents money for, well, essentially nothing. It all came to a head about 10 years ago. My dad refused to pay them until the 2 chuckleheads in charge showed him how they spent the money. Rather than provide a fair accounting of the neighborhood funds, the president and the treasurer both decided they wanted to sue for the money owing. Well, we went to court, and it turns out that you don't just get to declare yourself the head of an association that doesn't exist. Turns out you can't collect money from their residents and spend it on cookware and paying their unqualified, uninsured friends to do road work. Turns out perjury is frowned on in a small claims court. They found out the hard way. I discovered in their court filings examples of perjury, fraud, and general dishonesty. They manufactured documents and got caught doing so. They were given multiple options to settle in court, but turned them all down, instead choosing to self-destruct in the most absurd and stubborn way available to them. None of their witnesses showed up. They brought literally no evidence with them to court, instead relying on the phrase, "It's not rocket science," and they somehow assumed the judge would accept "it's not rocket science" as some kind of evidence, or as somehow lending credibility to their claims. He didn't. The HOA lost and ended up owing us money. The HOA dissolved immediately afterwards, and if the story ended there, it would make sense, but not be a very interesting story. But you're not here for just a good guys win story. You want satisfaction. Turns out, one of those two old men that fancied themselves in charge of the HOA could not accept defeat. Our driveway lights started to disappear, and someone was blocking the culvert in the middle of the night and washing out the road in front of my dad's house. Minor vandalism was happening almost on a nightly basis. So I came home late one night, and sure enough, this 70-year-old moron is thrashing about in the April temperature swamp, having fallen in after blocking the culvert. He's got his shirt tangled in an underwater branch and can't get out. We had to haul him out because he was so drunk and suffering from hypothermia that he couldn't even move. Then we called the cops. He got yelled at, trespassed, and no driveway lights ever went missing again. And the cops let me keep the trash can lid that he was using to block the culvert. Free lid. Moral of this story is, don't take crap off an HOA. They may look official, but I'll bet you most HOAs are doing something shady that'll reflect poorly on them in court should you find yourself at odds with them. I just do not know in what universe you think it will work to create an organization and just do all the things that are red flag central. They don't just have a red flag flying in front of their house. They bought the whole freaking red flag store, franchised the dang thing in their backyard, and own the whole shady place, right? Well, I don't know what they're thinking. I think maybe they thought this was like a pyramid get rich quick scheme, just going to fancy up and draw up a little HOA, right? And then just say, oh, we're going to just fine people for crap that just doesn't even make sense, and we're just going to come out of nowhere. And you follow me how this makes absolutely zero sense, but to them, it was the brightest idea in the world in their own little dingy, dense minds. OP, you did great not taking up their crap and then just hanging on to yourself knowing that it was just all a farce, and you just nailed it. Way to go, OP. HOA next door tries to enforce their rules on me. Try again, fool. Posted by Correct Campaign 3707. I purchased my house in 2015. Not even a thought of an HOA in the village. At the time, my neighbors were the cemetery to the west, 5 acres of woodland to the north, neighbor's house 200 feet away to the east, and south, frontage onto a secondary highway with land dropping off on the far side. Ideal location for compromising Hub's mentality of middle of nowhere, antisocial stance, and my wanting at least neighbors within screaming distance. Fast forward to 2021. Land parcel to the north sold to some numbered company. Then the one neighbor we had listed his house for sale. As discovered after the fact, Mark sincerely apologized when he realized what happened. The same company bought his house and land in early 2022. They raised his house and outbuildings and applied for residency. So far, nothing concerns me. Well, they start subdividing the land for lots, applied to have road allowances and water services. No wastewater service available, cause, rural village. This means, to those not familiar, that they have to allow square footage on the lots for a septic system, which for a 2-bed, 2-bath house is minimum 750 square feet with a specific setback from the adjacent property lines. Also, the township that I live in has no requirements for fence permits, just height rules. So for the front line of the house line, it's 4 feet, and versus backyard is 6 feet, and you may not install the fence over the property line, and unless agreed upon in writing prior to fence installation, it may not be installed on the property line with the adjoining neighbor being responsible for cost and/or maintenance. Well, so far, I have been given notice of: first, a variance application to have the 2 houses planned next to me have their septic beds closer to my property line than the township bylaws allow. And next, a legal notice to allow fencing to be built on the property line with half the linear cost be assigned to my address. I got a notice from the developer's lawyers that I, as an adjacent property, will be required to abide by their neighborhood aesthetic requirements, which comes down to rules on houses and garage and outbuilding colors, vehicles allowed on the property, and colors of the flowers allowed in publicly visible flower beds, which are red, white, and blue only. Excuse me? I live in Canada. Red and white maybe, but blue? Yeah, right, try again. I bought this house without deed restrictions. My name is, it's Karen. I am the original 1967 version. My mother had a premonition about the bee witch I would grow up to be, so bring it on. Update: the township council meetings are on the 15th of each month. Last night I attended, as this was when the variance application for the development next door was to be discussed and decided on. I sat through 2 very boring hours of other township business, and when it came to the developer's turn to explain why they needed the variance, it came down to because the septic beds would need to be raised due to water table heights. Moving the septics further back on the lots would allow additional flat area between the houses and the septic beds, so that future homeowners would have more room to install things like an above-ground swimming pool. So for those not familiar, putting a swimming pool on a septic bed is a really bad thing. The first question the council asked after the developer went through their arguments: any objections of this variance request? I stood, voiced my objections. These are quarter-acre lots. It's not a space issue, and wanting more room for toys is not a valid reason for a variance for an item that could have environmental impact on my property. Variance denied. This right here is a perfect example of the HOA thinking with like half their brain, which is really like the only part of the brain that they have, and they're thinking this is what we want to do, this is how it's going to work, and then OP comes in with a full brain, see here, HOAs don't have that, and she's like, all right, well, this is clearly not going to work. You're not going to put a pool over a septic tank, which is a horrible idea. I mean, I'm not even going to tell you why, you know why. And then all these other things, putting that by this property too close to that, and just coming in with bravery. HOAs will pick on you and basically try to force you and scare you into going with what they want to say, but when you know the rules, and so do I, you have that full commitment that I'm thinking of, and you would not get this from any other OP. Way to go, OP, and please tell me you caught that reference in the comments below. Way to go. Click my next crazy HOA Karen compilation on your screen to continue your listening session. Thanks for checking this one out, and see you in the next one.